He is going to fight. He will kill as many Russians as he needs to. Every time we say, oh, Ukraine's not ready for NATO, we're signaling to Putin that we're weak. Trump would say, look, we're providing the money, we're providing the arms, we have a say too. He would tell Putin one message, he'd tell Zelensky another message. It would force them to end the war.
Does the time play for Ukraine?
Yes, yes.
Hello from Kyiv. We are European Pravda, a media from Ukraine which covers EU, NATO and international affairs. And Kurt Volker, long-standing ambassador of the US and friend of Ukraine, is here with us. Thank you for being with us, and let's start about the war.
Thanks, Sergey.
First of all, let me ask a difficult question. Is Ukraine winning a war?
It depends how you define winning. My definition of winning is Ukraine is and will be forever a sovereign, independent European democracy. I have no doubt about that. I think Ukraine has already won. Putin has created a new Ukraine, and I think that this is going to last. If you define victory as taking all of the territory, the 1991 borders, we're not there today. And it's going to be hard. It's going to take time. You're going to need help from the United States and from NATO and Europe. So we can't say how this really looks now or even next year. But on the big picture of Ukraine as part of a European family, a sovereign democracy, an independent state, future member of the EU and NATO, that's done.
For Ukrainians, as we see in surveys, victory is definitely a return of all our territories. And as far as I see, you are not that much certain that it will happen.
It's going to be hard, is what I said. It's going to be hard. That I think Ukraine gets its territory back when the Russians decide they've had enough of Vladimir Putin.
So with Putin, it's just impossible to beat that nuclear power.
Well, he is going to fight. He is going to kill as many people as he needs to. And look what he just did in Avdiivka. He threw thousands and thousands of Russians to their death because he just wanted to say, we took Avdiivka. And that's his mentality. That's what he's willing to do. He will kill as many Russians as he needs to in order to keep the war going and in order to stay in power, up until the moment that the Russians decide they've had enough.
We in Ukraine, we see that West is not that much supporting us, that West is getting tired of the war.
I don't agree with that.
But there is no that kind of unconditional support that we used to have in 2022, isn't it?
Yeah, you had an emotional level of support, immediate and very passionate, very emotional in 2022. Now you have something that looks more like structural and long-term and sustained support. And I'll give you my thoughts on the US because I'm sure this is where you're going. But before I do, I was just at the Munich Security Conference this past weekend. The support for Ukraine there is extraordinary among European states, among the senators that were there, the congressmen that were there, Vice President Harris was there. Extraordinary support for Ukraine. I was at Davos in January. The same thing on the economic side. You have people who are very passionate about helping Ukraine still. And what we've done is we've found mechanisms in order to try to keep this going over a longer period of time.
Meanwhile, we see that even military support by the US is on pause, unfortunately. Yes. And now the plan A is that budgetary support maybe would not be prolonged.
There are a lot of things in the air, and we don't know how it sorts out. First off, there is a significant majority in the Republican Party and in the Democratic Party, maybe 80% of both, that strongly support Ukraine, and they want to see this aid passed. The reason it has not happened to date has nothing to do with Ukraine. It's all about the U.S. southern border, where today we have anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 people coming into our country illegally every day. And the public has had enough. The political parties want to do something about it, but then they disagree fundamentally over what to do. And so that is hung up in the Congress, and that has blocked all of the other legislation. I do believe this will get unblocked, and I think it'll probably happen in the coming weeks, probably in March, and we'll see that assistance come through. For the economic humanitarian part of the U.S. assistance, at $45 billion for military, $16 billion for humanitarian and economic, one of the proposals that's out there for how to get this to the fore would take that out. And the theory there is that the American military aid is unique and vital for Ukraine. The financial aid is something that others can do, particularly the European Union, and they have already approved 50 billion euros for Ukraine just a few weeks ago. So that is the thought behind that. And also, our congressmen are always judging the politics of their votes. The reason that the border matters is because they want to be able to tell voters, yes, we gave $60 billion to help Ukraine, but we also took care of our own security. If they can't say that, say we didn't do anything about our own security, but we gave $60 billion to Ukraine, that's a harder sell politically. So that's why these are connected in that way. Similar thing with the budgetary support or the economic support. The question is, if our teachers in the United States are underpaid, why should we give money to the Ukrainian budget so they can pay their teachers? That's the political logic. Obviously, that's oversimplified. It's not fair. And I think there is still a very good chance that that economic aid will be approved as well. It's only one of multiple ways to go forward by stripping that out. But you understand, I think, the way the politics get played in the U.S.
Let's not hide the elephant in the room. And the name of this elephant is Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. We see that he makes statements that are contrary to what you say.
Yeah. There was an article today in the Washington Post by a friend of mine, Mark Thiessen. He's a conservative himself, where he makes a very clear, strong case why Republicans should vote to provide the aid to Ukraine right now. And the argument is that Trump says this wouldn't have happened if he was president. And if he's elected, he's going to end the war in a day. And he has said in different interviews that he would tell Putin, I'm going to pour the aid into Ukraine. You're never going to win, so just stop it. If Republicans want Trump to win, and if they want Trump to be successful, that is to say, stop Putin's war in Ukraine, then they need to pass this package now so that that's possible. Because if they don't, it's going to get worse for Ukraine before Trump is even elected, if he's elected. So it's a very strong argument. I encourage your viewers and your readers to take a look at that. Mark Thiessen in the Washington Post. Trump has been very careful most of the time not to say anything specific. He is against the war. He had I would describe it as an unnatural warmth toward Vladimir Putin when he was president. And yet he also was the one who overturned the arms embargo on Ukraine and provided the first lethal defensive assistance, the anti-tank systems, the Javelins. He closed down the Russian consulate in San Francisco. He was very much opposed to Nord Stream, and he increased sanctions against Russia. So he had this pattern of saying one thing, warm toward Putin, and also doing other things that were completely pushing back on Russia. So I think we don't really know what he would do if he was elected president again. But the right thing to do, whether you are a Democrat or Republican, is pass this assistance package for Ukraine now, because it will strengthen Ukraine. It'll push back on the Russian offensive, create the possibility for stopping the war at some point.
Donald Trump is keen to negotiate with Putin. For Ukraine, these kind of negotiations are unacceptable because, well, nothing can be done, nothing can be decided
without Ukraine.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that even Trump probably understands that. Now, he also would argue, I would assume, Trump would say, look, we're providing the money, we're providing the arms, we have a say too. But you're absolutely right. You can't cut a deal about Ukraine over the heads of Ukrainians. That would be both morally wrong and it would never work.
Don't you think that Trump, as a person who is completely like out of ordinary political logic, would like to make this kind of, what he say, a peace?
Let's not make assumptions about what he thinks or what he would do, because we don't know. And honestly, I don't think he does either. I think he makes it up as he goes along. What he does do is he tries to leverage position. And so he says, we have the money, we have a position of strength. He has said publicly that he would tell Putin one message, he'd tell Zelensky another message. It would force them to end the war. That's what he says. But what does that mean in reality? What does that mean when Russia is abducting children, raping women, killing soldiers, mutilating, still trying to advance and take more Ukrainian territory? You can't leave it where it is. This has to be stopped and it has to be pushed back. And I think that's the reality that that kind of attitude is going to confront if he actually gets elected and becomes president again. It's a very different situation than when he was president the last time, because there was no full-scale invasion. There was a process, even if it was deeply, fatally flawed, this Minsk process, but it existed. And he didn't have much experience with Putin. And now we've seen so many things are different. Putin has come out clearly and without any hiding anymore as genocidal, as an imperialist, as laying a claim to the territory of other countries, saying that Russia has a right to seize it, of denying that Russia's neighboring peoples have equal rights, like Ukrainians or Belarusians or Georgians or others, and launched a terrible war, a horrific war, which is completely unacceptable by any norms, by any standards. So that's the Putin we see today. Wasn't as visible. Some of us knew that was Putin, but it wasn't as visible in 2017. And also, we've seen Ukraine unified as a country, forge a much greater sense of national identity, national strength. We've seen Ukraine fight and take very hard decisions about its future. We've seen Ukraine make a very clear decision that it wants to be part of the European Union, it wants to be part of NATO, it sees itself as part of that same European family as other European nations. Ukraine has actually developed now probably the strongest and most experienced military in Europe. So it is a very different situation today than what was the case when Trump was president. And I would have to assume that if he is elected president, all of those things will have to be taken into account.
Let's talk about a wider context of Russian aggression. You believe that Putin can attack even NATO countries,
Yes.
don't you?
Yes.
What can lead to that?
I believe what can lead to that is weakness
Of the West?
of the West. If we do not demonstrate to Putin that we are absolutely resolved to help Ukraine defend itself and recover its territory, to defend all of our allies, not as people say, not a single inch. We have to show that we are committed and strong and capable and willing in order to deter him. And every time we hesitate, every time we say, oh, we need a negotiation, every time we say, well, you can have this weapon system, but you can't have that weapon system. Every time we say, oh, Ukraine's not ready for NATO, we're signaling to Putin that we're weak and we're not determined.
You did a lot of that during the last 2 years.
Yes, we have. Yes, we have. And that's the concern. And I think we need to turn that around. We need to be much more direct, much more committed in order to create deterrence. That's what works. Weakness actually leads to war.
I would not exclude that under the next president, even if his name is Donald Trump, this change is possible.
Yes, me too. I thank you for saying that. I agree with that. I think President Biden would do that if he's reelected. I think that He is cautious about Russian escalation, and in my view, too cautious, because I don't think Putin can escalate. He's already done it. But I think he's cautious about that. But I think if he's reelected, I think this is the only way to rebuild peace in Europe. And I think that will be the legacy that he would want to leave. And likewise, I think President Trump, if he were elected, would probably do the same thing. He always talks about how important it is for him to end the war. Well, you don't end it through weakness. And then the other candidate, who we should not forget, is going to continue running. She's going to continue getting delegates, and she will go to the convention, is Nikki Haley. And it's still possible something can happen that she ends up being the nominee. And she is the most clear-eyed and determined of the candidates now for support for Ukraine.
Is there a chance for Ukraine to become a NATO ally before the war ends?
I think so. I don't think it's likely. I think the U.S. administration and the German government have made clear they don't want to move that quickly. So I don't think it's going to happen yet. But I believe it can and should.
In Ukraine, we are a bit afraid that even after the war ends, those arguments that are behind the decisions of the White House, of Chancellor Scholz, these arguments would stay. So that even after the war, there would be some voices against Ukraine's membership.
It's reasonable to have that worry, because it's based with inexperience. And so I understand the worry. But I don't think I don't agree with that. I think that Germany has fundamentally changed in its attitude towards Ukraine and its attitude toward Russia. Scholz, like Biden, is trying to manage Putin, manage escalation, but the attitudes of Germany have changed. Also, in the United States, I think the attitudes of people who deal with policy and national security have changed. There is a much greater commitment to bringing Ukraine into NATO now than there ever was before, and it's a matter of getting the conditions right. This is where I think there's things we should still be talking about this year. The fear that people have, the Biden administration, German government, is that admitting Ukraine to NATO now would draw NATO directly into the war against Russia immediately. It would create a wider war with attacks on NATO countries. It could lead to the use of nuclear weapons. That's their concern. I think that concern is important to take into account, but I don't think it is dispositive. I think we can manage this. And it's important that we manage it, because if we don't manage that concern, if we just get frozen because of that fear, then we signal to Putin, we're afraid, we are deterred, and Putin will continue to fight and do whatever he wants. We need to sit down with Ukraine in the NATO-Ukraine Council right away and start talking about what Article 5 means. Article 5 of the NATO Treaty is not specific about what you do to help an ally who's been attacked. It just says that you do something. You must respond collectively. And we are doing a lot already. We shouldn't minimize what we're doing. We're doing a lot, providing arms, training, equipment, organizational support, logistical support, communications, intelligence, you name it. There's a lot that we're already doing. That's meaningful. We are committed to continuing to do that. That's meaningful. There's more we can do. We should, in my view, be very focused on air defense for Ukraine. We're providing a lot of equipment. We are not participating directly in air defense, but I think as a humanitarian mission, as a way of protecting civilians and cities and civilian infrastructure, I think that we could do more to help Ukraine directly with air defense. We are just beginning now to do things with Ukraine about demining in the Black Sea. We should be more involved and more aggressive about maritime demining in order to facilitate the opening of ports for normal shipping, including container shipping, because this is the lifeline for Ukraine's economy. Shipping has to go back and forth. We have not done any freedom of navigation operations in the Black Sea for a long time, and we should. The Black Sea is international waters. There are many countries with territorial waters and borders on the Black Sea. Many other countries have an interest in freedom of navigation and freedom of shipping. We are doing this off the coast of Yemen in order to protect freedom of navigation from the Houthi rebels. We should be doing the same thing in the Black Sea against the Russian threats of piracy.
To end this interview, I understand that it's rather impossible to make a clear prediction, but how do you see it? How long can this war last?
There's a famous baseball coach in the United States named Yogi Berra who said, it's very hard to make predictions, especially about the future. And that's exactly it. You know, no one can predict timing. And I do believe that we see so many things in Russia that indicate fragility inside Russia. The fact that they won't release Navalny's body, the fact that they killed him to begin with, these are signs of weakness. Prigozhin's rebellion, that's a sign of disarray and weakness. Putin killing tens of thousands of Russian soldiers in order to get Avdiivka so that he could claim this as a victory in his effort to show that he's a great leader for his re-election. These are all signs of weakness. The fact that they need ammunition from North Korea and ammunition from Iran, the drones from Iran, because they can't keep up on their own with what they're trying to do. It's a sign of weakness. The fact they're in budget deficit, which they were not before. They've lost their energy markets in Europe. That's a big deal. So there's a lot more fragility under the surface than Putin wants to show. And I think the more we help Ukraine, Ukraine strengthens itself, its economy starts to grow again. Russia is not able to advance. Ukraine inflicts heavy casualties on Russian forces. This is going to create pressures in society.
So does the time play for Ukraine?
Yes, yes. As long as we keep helping you and the European Union keeps helping you, time is on Ukraine's side.
So let's hope that this would end up earlier than later.
I hope so.
And thank you for supporting us, you personally, and the United States as a country which made us still be alive.
Yeah. God bless Ukraine. God bless Ukrainian people.